Saintess Summons Skeletons. By Morn. Chapter 421, Bookie also ate. Sofia, Iwar Parath and Bookie were sitting around a bonfire in a valley not far from the tower. The conversation had drifted away to a great many topics, with Iwar taking his turn to ask a lot of questions about the last year's events, as well as Zire and Alitha's current whereabouts. In between 2 bites of firebird roasted meat, Sofia brought the subject of soul offsprings back up. "Can you tell me more about the spiritually reproducing races?" she asked. Iwar answered with a question of his own. "You know about dragons already. Is it the Fae or the nymphs which interest you?" "Honestly, both. Fae and Fae are the same thing, right?" Sofia first asked. "From what I know they are supposedly extinct." "Fae, fairy, all different ways to refer to the same race. They are a reclusive few, and not eager to reproduce. Some of their species might have very well gone extinct by now, I would not be surprised. My mentor, the one who taught me the basics of animism, thousands of years back, was a Fae. He is probably still alive. It has been more than 3,000 years since you died and you still believe him to be alive." "That is so. He is a hermit, the troubles of the world have always failed to reach him. Thousands of years may go by but they mean little to him." "He must be powerful," Sofia commented. "Not particularly. I was stronger than him by the time of my death. He is not interested in growing stronger. But the respect he commands among the stronger races is not to be underestimated," Iwar explained before stuffing his face full of roasted bird meat. "Bookie, can you show him the page?" The Book of Skeletons appeared in Bookie's small hands and he brought it to Iwar, showing him the page containing the tiny creature born from a Midnisit ingot, which Sofia still did not have the mana to summon yet. Iwar let out a rare expression of surprise as he observed the page. Sofia explained the skeleton's origin, showing Iwar the old logs of the ingot's description, and what she thought about it, which left Iwar pensive for a while as he ate. It was only when he had finished drinking his entire bowl of soup that he felt ready to talk. "I believe I have a clear explanation about how this may have happened. Be aware that it is all conjecture. That would already be nice, as I have nothing. To begin with, let me explain the basic, innate power, which all Fae have, regardless of the species. They corrupt their environment." "Corrupt?" Iwar nodded in confirmation. "That is to say, the environment around them changes to copy their characteristics. The longer they stay in the same place, the more drastic the changes. In the case of my master, he is from a species with innate powers and soul magic, and as he stays in the same place, everything around him develops a strong spiritual body which will naturally defend him." Wait. Did you not say when I first summoned you that animism first came from a belief that all things have a soul? How would you make that mistake with that kind of mentor?" "Precisely because he was my mentor was I led to this false conclusion. I did not know, at the time, that his mere presence was what granted his surroundings a soul. He taught me through example what became the basis for my animist magic, but that is all he did. Back then, he did not even speak the human language," Iwar recalled in a nostalgic tone. "I see. Sorry for interrupting. Pay it no mind, your questions are always welcome. I personally find your inquisitive nature to be quite endearing, you remind me of my old pupils. Anyway, as you may have understood by now, this would explain the discovery of an unusually huge vein of Midnisit. It was a Fae with Midnisit bones which made everything around him become the same magic repellent crystal," Sofia completed by herself. "And the ingot was made with its remains. That is what I believe, too. Although I did not know about the Midnisit bones, I believe I have heard of that particular species of Fae before. But you are missing a crucial point." "I am." Sofia tried to think about something she might have missed but she failed to think about anything plausible. Seeing her struggle, Iwar finally explained his theory. "The truth is, this Fae in your book is likely not dead." "What?" Sofia exclaimed, incredulous at the outrageous claim that the skeleton stuck in Bookie's pages may still be a living creature. "Not that it is alive either, I theorize it to be in an in-between state, much like I have been for a very long time before you brought me back." "And Bookie still ate it?" "Likely for the best. It is likely that the ingot was crafted from this Fae's remains to help preserve its soul within for a long time until a way to bring it back was found. Had they gone through the painstaking process of refining it to make something out of it, they would have not left the ingot unused, would they? Either way, you can always ask the craftsman, Alcorm, you said." "That's it, yes, I still have the letter for him, 2, Sofia told him, bringing out the sealed envelope from Zangdar's hero, labeled to Alcorm D. Alcorm. Morlag. This is without a doubt the dragon I knew, Iwara told Sofia, always one to meddle with humans. We shall pay him a visit after this trial, is that fine with you, Lady Sofia? That's the dragon you knew? We really should have gone into more details about our stories when I summoned you. Ahaha, Iwara laughed, you had more important things on your mind back then, and I was more than a bit disoriented myself. Your humble servant is here now. I will have to leave you again soon, but I will be waiting for you wherever we land after this trial. I'm counting on it. We have a lot on our plate. Anything else to say about the Fae? Iwara ripped another chunk of meat off of the firebird roasting over the open fire. This is really good, he commented before quickly giving a few more details on the Fae skeleton. It is likely that the soul will wake up when you summon it. You should take your precautions as it very well might try to rip off your head, if so. What's more, considering the Middenicid bones, this is probably one of the rarest Fae subspecies, the magicless Fae. They have a high resistance to magical damage and effects, are naturally completely invisible, can fly faster than you are able to comprehend, are violent and savage in nature, and could tear a hole through a Damian steel with their bare hands. Magicless Fae. Hearing Iwara's explanation, Sofia couldn't stop herself from digging through her old system logs. After just a few seconds of intense search, she found what she was looking for, the description of the invisibility potion provided by Niset before exploring Saria's Sky Island in Savoln. Faewing's Dust Extract, a potion brewed around the natural powers of invisibility of an extinct species of magicless Fae. It allows light to flow through you, and completely suppresses any sound, mana, heat, and particle emission. Active skills will be unavailable. May cause sensory deprivation, loss of balance and loss of own body spatial perception. Allows phasing through thin objects such as grass or pebbles. Mana regeneration -75% while the effect is active. Effect duration, 6 hours. Item level, 166. Grade, precious. It does say extinct species here. And for Niset to be able to get this potion when he works for Red Carpet. Richard helped with making Zangdar. He was likely present when the ingot was refined. No wonder. Things line up very clearly. Sofia looked at Bookie. You ate this thing's soul. Bookie nodded. See, Iwara commented. Will it be alive when I summon it? Bookie shrugged. You don't know, Will you be able to prevent it from ripping off my head if it is actually alive? Bookie energetically shook his head, making an X with his arms. It's good that I can survive without a head, then. If you will let me be here when you first call it, I may be able to prepare a few things, Iwara suggested while sloppily gulping down his sixth big chunk of firebird meat. We will do that, then. Hey, IWA, now that I think about it, this is not your first time making a mana heart, right? Iwara wiped his greasy mouth with his clothes, and he nodded, indeed. The first time was a great deal more frustrating than this one. The entire process this trial expedites took me right about 200 years to get right. I must admit, I am a bit sad to have lost it. I hope we can find my tomb and collect it in the future. It would be a nice keepsake of the times gone by. Chapter 422, Fenrir. Sofia and Iwara's discussion kept going throughout the morning, going into a variety of topics until they looped back to the trial itself. Iwara stood up from the rock he was sitting on. Fenrir, yes, that would be the closest of the 3 moons. Be on the lookout for unnatural landscapes and points of interest, such as if you were to find, let's say a giant tree. Sometimes I have found things in the middle of nowhere, Iwara explained while turning his head in the tower's direction, but generally trial events are near clearly visible landmarks. Sofia thanked him for the tip and expressed how she found it strange what was and wasn't being censored. She had tried to bring up the paper people earlier in the conversation and found herself completely unable to do so. We should get going, Iwara said, you especially should not be wasting time. We will have ample time to speak again after the trial. Thank you for the meal. Right. Well, see you in a year, then. It was nice to have you around for a bit. If you stay nearby after the trial I can do the swapping trick to find you again. You might have to wait for a while though. A few months is nothing to someone as old as I am. I might pick up fishing again while I wait. I do wonder how much the aquatic life may have evolved while I was dead. Sofia took place in the shuttle's single seat, which closed up around her lower body. Almost immediately, a familiar countdown began in a feminine voice. Wait, in the end he never said anything about the nymphs. I will have to wait until the end of the trial. The shuttle took off, and Sofia did not pay attention to it. She was already bored of the process, lost in her thoughts. By the time the violent shaking of the shuttle brought her back to reality, she was already landing inside of another tower. The first thing she noticed as she left her seat was how weak gravity was. This is much weaker than Valiadron's moon. Because this moon is smaller, I imagine. That's what it was, right? I was a bit distracted when Asti explained this stuff in class. With all the books I've read, not a single one explained what gravity really is. Well, whatever, let's see what this moon has to offer. Perith came out to be the vanguard as soon as Sofia left the small shuttle. The tower looked similar to the one on the planet, with the difference that the shuttle was directly on ground level. Sofia had to walk around touching the walls to find the exit, but she actually saw the fake wall before she touched it, thanks to her left eye's visual anomaly spotter. This function works but barely. It was the same for the paper person, it reacted to its invisibility but it wasn't very obvious. More feedback for Richard. Perith and Sofia left the tower, the environment outside was instantly less welcoming. There was no air, no mana, and the white, dusty ground was hot like a desert's sand at noon. Sofia looked up, she could see the two other moons, no trace of the sun or the planet. The only light reaching there came from the sunlight reflecting on the other two moons' surfaces. It took us all the way to the hidden side of the moon? One quick look over the horizon told Sofia that there was nothing nearby. The surface of this moon, so far, looked an awful lot like Valiadron's moon which she had crashed onto, barren, dusty, and riddled with large craters. If there's important stuff here and you're not able to survive in space, you're really done. It should probably be expected from here on out that the trials might have all kinds of hostile environments. Sofia was ready to go out and explore, but a simple question stuck in her mind: how was she supposed to find the tower again to leave? Backtracking her way on the planet would be hard but not impossible, as she could recognize the general lay of the land. On the moon, everything looked alike. Actually, if there's nothing here. Sofia got one of her thousands of stored bone wings from her bone storage, and severed the tip with bone dominus. She let it fall to the ground and started walking. As soon as she felt the bit of bone leaving the 90 meters of her dominus perception range, she dropped another bit of bone to the ground. A bit slow, but I have to advance carefully anyway. With no obvious target in sight, Sofia kept going in a straight line until the wing she was dropping pieces of ran out and she had to bring out another one. A bit too slow. And walking on air doesn't even work here because there's no atmosphere. I could go with the rune-forged flight, but I can't cancel the second tier by cutting my head off because of the healing restrictions, so just a bit of flight might take forever to recover from in the mana department. Sofia turned to Perith. Sanctified grounds, please. Perith shook his head but activated the skill anyway, even crouching and holding out his hand for Sofia to step onto. He knew exactly where this was going. Right, give me the slow fall ring. Sofia activated the slow fall ring, which she knew effectively reduced the effect of gravity on her, and Perith stood up with her in his large hand. Go. Using all of his strength, Perith threw Sofia up in the air. She flew up hundreds of meters and took her time to survey the horizon at the apex of the jump. Found a thing. Sofia used the zoom of her left eye to get a better view on the large grey thing she spotted in the distance, just in time to see it disappear into the ground. Some kind of giant grey crab? This thing must have been the size of a large house, and it just disappeared inside a dark hole. She spun around, trying to see anything else, but that was it. In what she estimated to be at least a 50-kilometer radius, there was nothing to be seen except a great many craters, fissures in the ground, and whatever that thing had been. She was already falling, and despite the slow fall ring's best efforts, her speed was gradually picked up as she neared the ground. Should still be fine. Perith caught her out of the sky before she could hit the ground. No damage. Thanks. She threw the ring back to Perith. You saw it too, right? What do you say, are we going there? Perith nodded as he dispelled the sanctified grounds. Let's hunt a giant crab. The rat Sofia had sent to check out the rift-like fissure in the ground which the monster had crawled inside of held the vision token over the hole. It's too dark. I would need to go there in person to see. That feels dangerous though. I know nothing about that crab monster, but if there's one thing which has held true so far, naturally large monsters are usually pretty high level. To the point that I can confidently say the stone ogres were actually very big for their level. I should assume the crab is at least over 250. What now? Had the hole been anywhere else but on the moon, Sofia would have been confident to check it herself since she could just fly away in case of emergency, but here her only escape tools were the rune-forged third tier's flight, which would cost at least half of her total mana, or the demon form. Sofia called the rat back while she charged a small pebble-sized light stone, then she stuck it onto the side of the vision token with some bone, which worked out because the vision tokens were made through bone dominus on small bone discs. The process of carving the tiny ritual circles onto the vision tokens was painful by hand, but the fine precision bone magic made it a breeze, and Sofia had mass manufactured all kinds of bone things in preparation for the trial, including tokens. The rat grabbed the token from Sofia's hand and ran the few hundred meters separating it from the hole in the ground. It's a cheap lightstone, just drop it in there, let's see what's in the hole. The token fell, and Sofia's vision with it. The token spinning through the air made the experience slightly nauseating. That's one deep hole. Finally the token left the long shaft, entering what Sofia thought was some sort of big cavernous chamber, and that was when the token hit the ground. The token was intact, but the lightstone shattered, its broken fragments spread around on the cavern's ground, giving Sofia a single second of extended vision into the underground's darkness before their light faded and she disconnected from the token. Well, there's a bigger grotto inside the hole. We did not learn much. Sofia felt the ground rumbling below her feet. It lasted a few seconds. Perith gave her sign that he had felt it too. Seism on the moon? Is that a thing? Wait. The link to the vision token is broken. Perith took the initiative to step in between Sofia and the fissure. They waited with bated breath, but nothing came of it. We might just be a bit too paranoid. With how the ground shook, the token might have just rolled a bit and fallen deeper underground or something. Still. Maybe it was that the crab attacked it and that shook the ground? Summoner and Skeleton looked at each other for a bit, and Sofia finally took a decision. Let's use the bone structures, I have a very bright idea. What's more, if it fails, we can use it to escape. And if it works, you still get full imprints. A foolproof plan. Sofia smirked. I wonder if an angel will show up this time. Chapter 423, Disaster and Seafood Platter. Sofia stood atop a tower of bones. Was the plan, but I have to admit, it looked better in my head. Sofia thought as she watched her newest architectural masterpiece from below. The tower in question was a tall, rickety, scaffolding-style watchtower, built directly on top of the hole, made by stacking empty cubic bone frames which were originally meant to build temporary houses like Nicet's deployable base, and finished with a bone gazebo at the top. The structural integrity was dubious at best, so angled bone spikes planted into the ground and stuck to the four corners helped it stay upright. It looked properly ridiculous but would allow Sofia to safely stand a good 50 meters above the fissure in the ground. The extended dominus range made building this really easy. I knew this was the best choice. But, hey! How do I get up there? I should make a ladder. A 50 meters long bone ladder and some climbing later, Sofia really stood at the top of the tower. Using bone dominus she made a round hole in the floor of the gazebo, giving her a direct line of sight on the dark hole beneath. The drop was like, what? 50 to 100 meters? I shouldn't be in the fireball radius. Going to be blind again, though. Wait, I should still have the Sun Temple's darkening goggles somewhere in the storage, right? Yet. Whoa, I had completely forgotten about those. Should help. They might not hold well against the heat though, so I'll have to bring them out at the last second. Can I call them directly over my eyes? After some testing, it turned out that putting the goggles on directly out of the storage was possible with the storage eye, but it required some very precise targeting or they would end up just appearing behind or in front of her head instead of on it. I'll have to practice that later. Alright. Time to get serious. Too bad there's no ambient mana, or I could have pushed it more. Oh well. As a last step of preparation, Sofia removed the roof of her bone gazebo, and she stood above the hole she made, staring down at the entrance of the giant crab's den. Armor ready, scepter ready. We're good to go. Blue sparks started to gather around Sofia's scepter. Slowly the bolt formed in Sofia's hand. After 20 seconds and 100,000 mana down the drain, the bright blue weapon of plasma flickered wildly in her grasp like a thunderbolt ready to strike, but this was only the beginning. She kept feeding it. 40 seconds in. 200,000 mana. The bolt calmed down. The plasma collapsed together into a fine, almost glossy spear of power and heat. The bone tower started to blacken and crumble from the intense heat, forcing Sofia to focus part of her attention to continually adding more bone to reinforce it while she was channeling the bolt. 20 more seconds passed, and the bolt reached the 300,000 mana mark, the strongest bolt she had ever crafted until now. The heat was so intense that her bone armor, even with the bone dominus blessing, continually crumbled to ash and reformed. As for her hand holding the scepter, Sofia couldn't see it anymore because the light was entirely too bright. Funnily enough, her right hand was the part of her body which suffered the least from the hellish heat, fully protected by the dragon scale arm. Sofia cautiously monitored her health. So far, despite the intense discomfort from the heat, she was still not hurt in the slightest. She kept pushing more mana into the bolt. The heat was starting to become debilitating. Sofia had never felt so hot, not even during her trip around the sun. Her stamina was starting to take a heavy blow, but health was still intact. As the energy of the bolt kept pulsating in her hand, it was becoming harder and harder to hold on, not because of the heat, but because of the wild volatile energy contained within. It wanted out, and managing to hold onto it was becoming a matter of arm strength and pure willpower. 350,000. The tower shook, the ground rumbled. Sofia couldn't see anything anymore. She switched to Paritha's vision, who was safely standing 2,000 meters away, ready to teleport in at any point if something happened. 370,000. Sofia's stamina was melting. She couldn't even feel her arm anymore. A long, spindly grey leg emerged out of the fissure. The crab was there, just beneath the surface. It seemed uncertain about what to do. To come out and attack? To fall back and flee? In the face of this mysterious new sun in the sky, even the monster was at a loss. 390,000. The crab never came out, scared of the unknown. It had decided to flee underground. Too late. 400,000. Sofia couldn't hold on for any longer even if she had wanted to. She deployed her wings, and, without a sound, the bolt left her hand and disappeared into the abyss below. The light around Sofia died down for a second as the bolt left her, allowing her to see again. Then, a spectacular geyser of light erupted from the hole, and an instant later, a sea of hellish blue flames. The explosion enveloped Sofia's body for a short instant, and the wild mana expelled carried her wings up. The eerily silent gigantic explosion propelled Sofia thousands of meters above the surface. She watched from above as the fireball quickly expanded and collapsed on itself. It had lasted for far less time than it had the previous time, and there had been no shockwave at all. With the last bits of mana she had, Sofia activated the slow fall ring, that and the thinly scattered mana from the explosion allowed her to fall at a fast but steady rate. The ground below had been torn open, a new crater spanning hundreds of meters revealed the entrance of many tunnels going even deeper. The moon rocks were charred, some still glowing hot, molten in places, steaming, and there was dust and rock debris flying everywhere. There was no trace of the crab monster anywhere. Finally a few system notifications came in. You have defeated Vake Harvester, LV 263, imprint ruined. You have defeated Vake Harvester, LV 252, imprint ruined. You have defeated Vake Harvester, LV 273, imprint ruined. 3. Nice. Ruined is still good for Parith, is it not? In fact, it was more than a few. You have defeated Vake Crawler, LV 242, imprint ruined. You have defeated Vake Crawler, LV 206, imprint ruined. You have defeated Vake Crawler, LV 238, imprint ruined. You have defeated Vake Crawler, LV 249, imprint ruined. The last notification of the lot was perhaps the most surprising. You have defeated Vake Hive Cleaner, LV 221, imprint ruined. Hive. Sofia did not even need to use Paritha's vision to see the ground shake. Even from so far up above, she could see it. The many tunnels Sofia's bolt had exposed to the outside had been empty just a second ago. They were no longer empty. To say they were swarming with life was an understatement. A flood of grey creatures of all shapes and sizes emerged from the moon's entrails. Sofia couldn't hear their screeches, but it did not take a genius to understand what was happening. Sofia had figuratively stepped on an ant's nest. And the local ants were very angry. Aha! I'm in danger. Health, 85 845/85 980. Stamina, 526/21047. Mana, 2601/417 How do I survive this? I got no mana back from heat death. These things can't use magic. Demon form? If I can't outrun them in my 5 minutes of transformation, I'm dead. The ground below Sofia was quickly getting overrun by the creatures, tens of thousands of them. Parith had to teleport to her and go straight into the storage to avoid getting swallowed by the swarm. The worst part was that considering her current trajectory, Sofia was going to fall straight into the larger of the tunnels which continued straight down farther than she could see, and from which the largest creatures were coming out of. Her only saving grace was that the creatures hadn't spotted her, yet. What? What can I do? Fast, I need to think faster. Many ideas flashed through Sofia's head and in the end, she decided on her best bet. Title changed to Master Thief. Title change function is locked for the next 24 hours. As she fell straight down, Sofia stayed perfectly still. As she fell dangerously close to the ground, some of the creatures finally noticed her in the sky, and the message was quickly spreading, among the swarm, which all turned to look in her direction. After 3 seconds, she disappeared. Master Thief, you stole all kinds of things from all kinds of people, even when it really should not have been possible. Effect, you are much harder to detect through magic and senses other than sight. Become invisible when you stand still for more than 3 seconds. Scared to make even the slightest movement, Sofia, invisible and unable to control her flight, fell straight into the tunnel, while more and more grey creatures crawled up the sides of it. Sofia almost teared up. I just wanted to try a big bolt. Chapter 424, If You're Full of Bones. Sofia fell deeper and deeper into the hole, while the unending swarm of Vake made their way to the outside. Just how deep does this hole go? Sofia was falling straight down, but she could not look too far under herself, as tilting her head to look would cancel the Master Thief title's invisibility. At the very least, the hive of these things will be considerably emptier by the time I land there. They're really going all out, just like a trail of ants. I wonder what they eat to sustain such a huge population. There were harvesters among the kills, but it's not clear what they could be harvesting here besides rocks. Looking at them closer. It's really like big land crabs, I suppose. Many different kinds of weird crabs. Seeing them, I have to wonder how it can be possible to have such a high level if they don't have mana. Say a human trained without mana, where are the limits of their possible strength? Like around level 10? 15? And yet the bigger ones of these Vakes can naturally be over level 250 without even having a mana core? How strong could their physical body possibly be without mana? Wait. What about the Phagiad? They never used magic except for the Alphagiad against the Angel, but that was while it was absorbing tons of mana from our world. Despite this, even the Phagiad larvae were rather tough. Most monsters still do use mana, but if there are exceptions. Sofia's train of thought was interrupted by her entrance inside of the actual Vake Hive's chambers. You have discovered the filter dungeon, Fenrir's Trial of Ragnarok. Dungeon objective, leave the dungeon through the Vake King's secret exit. Chance at reward will be permanently lost if you leave through a wrong exit. Reward, large heart catalyzer choice box *1. Even this entire hive is an intended part of the trial. It's a dungeon, but it's not about defeating the boss. Interesting. Sofia quickly observed the hive's chamber she was falling inside of. It was without a doubt the largest underground cavern she had ever seen, looking to be about 200 meters from bottom to top, extending in all directions as far as the eye could see, with a huge web of pillars holding the place together. The flow of Vake leaving the hive in response to Sofia's attack looked like it was slowing down, but by and large, the millions of grey-shelled creatures within these underground halls still flowed in her general direction. I can't just let myself hit the ground, it has to be swarming under me right now. What to do? With her very limited time and resources, Sofia had a sudden burst of creativity. At that time, she swore in her heart to really never let go of the scepter she was holding in her right hand until this moment. With only about 3 seconds until impact with the swarm of crawling Vake underneath, the weapon's property of having channeling time became crucial. I am the solid ground. I am the graveyard. Right as Sofia was about to collide with the swarm, invisible skeletal hands burst out of her armor. They grabbed and clutched at the bone armor with all their might, dragging it and its owner into the spirit realm. A ghostly Sofia phased through the swarm of skittering Vake and dove into the ground beneath. The experience was surprisingly painful. The vague's spiritual bodies were brimming with energy and scraped against Sofia's soul as she fell through them. The mark of Afinareth seemed to negate the actual soul damage like it did when Sofia was the subject of teleportations, but it was somehow still painful. As for the grey creatures, they seemed entirely unaware of what had just happened. The graveyard skeletons quickly stabilized and stopped her momentum, but Sofia was worried about her mana. She still only had a meager 3,000 to freely use, it wouldn't be enough to sustain the graveyard, she thought. A quick look at her actual mana, however, quickly dispelled that misconception. It was actually going up. Despite being in a monolith environment with no sunlight, despite the sustained cost of the graveyard, it was going up. That's right. I usually use so much extra mana to manage it myself. The graveyard is only 50 mana per second. My regen right now. 94. I can keep the graveyard up forever and still regenerate 44 mana per second. I'm so used to it being unusable for some reason or another, but right now. It feels perfectly safe. The vague swarm was still actively moving, just a few meters above her, but as far as she could tell, she had managed to infiltrate the hive completely unnoticed. Master Thief makes it hard to detect me with senses other than sight. It also makes me invisible if I don't move. But am I also invisible in the spiritual realm? And if it's the graveyard skeletons dragging me around, am I really moving? Can I just go around like this forever? Wait. What about the range limit of the graveyard? The skeletons can only appear inside me, but I am the reference point now. I cast it on myself. Does that mean the graveyard is moving with me? If so. Sofia tried to pull on the skill's mana circuits to see if she could find the usual range's boundaries. She felt nothing. Heh heh. Ah ha ha ha. This dungeon is going to be a piece of cake. A new title has been unlocked. The system notification actually sobered Sofia up a little. Since when am I so lucky? And after a bit of reflection, she had to admit, actually, never mind, I've had a lot of good luck for the last few years, I think. Not a single major loss ever since. Sofia remembered the silent orphanage. I should have just been happy with my good fortune and stopped there. Having ruined her own mood, Sofia glanced over the new title before dismissing it with a frown. Spirit Seeker, you found a way to explore the spirit realm at your leisure, a rare luxury for one with a physical body. Beware, spending too much time in such a foreign state of being will eventually lead to irreversible changes. Effect, diminishes spiritual drag. Thank you for the warning. Alright, whatever. I just need to be fast and find that secret exit. Sofia looked around. As usual, her vision from the spiritual realm was blurry at best. Supposedly Alith could see a bit more clearly when in her ghost form, but no matter what, it always felt like being lost in a sea of fuzzy white clouds. She could, however, clearly see the delimitations of the Vake's hive caverns, seeing as said creatures had very strong spiritual bodies and were moving around a lot, they contrasted clearly with the empty space that was the interior of the moon's rocks in which Sofia was hidden. It makes a lot more sense than the Thromber hive, structurally. Tunnels tend to be straight vertical or horizontal shafts linking the different caverns in a way that's easy to navigate. Sofia slowly moved around within the walls. She noticed that the entrance of some tunnels were glowing, so she carefully moved underground to check it out. The result was that the glowing things were the spiritual bodies of relatively small vague creatures. They were waiting in groups of 2 or 3 at the entrance of certain tunnels, and did not move at all unlike the millions of other creatures coming and going. Guards? The quest did mention them having a king. Is it far-fetched to think they would have some kind of established society with rankings and guards? From my kills there were vague harvesters, crawlers, and hive cleaners. Maybe following the tunnels with the most guards will lead me to the king eventually? The supposed guards in question moved while Sofia thought things through. The 3 she was observing had all gathered close to a wall. The wall Sofia was inside of. Panicking, she had the graveyard skeletons carry her away from this tunnel entrance. She observed the bright spiritual bodies from afar, and after a minute or 2 they eventually returned to their original positions. So they can still somewhat feel me, even within the walls. I think it's clear this is not a combat quest. If simple harvesters are already over level 250, then it's not a wild guess to think the guard might very well be over 300. And that would mean the king could be even stronger. It's no wonder the goal is something as simple as just finding the secret exit. To anyone without some serious stealth abilities even that would seem almost impossible. But my tools are so varied I can probably deal with it. Let's just follow my instinct for now. Sofia went ahead with her plan of following the tunnels with the most guards. She roamed under the main chamber for a while, until she found a tunnel with 4 guards, and she decided to go with it. Chapter 425, Convention Confusion. The tunnel took her straight down for a few hundred meters, further confirming that the graveyard's range limitation was bypassed by her new trick, and she then found herself above another cavernous room. 4 more guards on this side of the tunnel. It would really be impossible to brute force this place for someone at my level. Still, I wonder what the intended solution is for someone without the ability to go through walls. Maybe the dungeon's name is a hint like the floor names were in the ranking tower. But Fenrir is just the name of the moon and I have never heard of the word Ragnarok. Can I get a definition? Sofia found the dungeon notification in her recent logs and focused on it the same way one could focus on their skills to access their details. That did nothing. Would have been too good to be true. Unless Sofia tried something that usually did not work, she tried to identify the words within the system window. Initially, there was no response from the spell, as usual, and then, out of nowhere, as Sofia was already ready to move on, she received a new notification. Hint 2 of 5 found. Hint 2, Ragnarok is the prophesied end and rebirth of a world. Oh. Now this is new. There might be more to this dungeon than just finding an exit after all. It also looks like I already missed the first hint. End and rebirth. I fail to see how that is supposed to help. Let's get back to exploring. Sofia found it hard to discern anything much about the contents of the caverns from the spirit realm. The only clear thing was that there were still Vake everywhere, but they were a lot calmer in there, which Sofia thought was likely because they were too deep to have noticed the bolt explosion. She roamed around this new cavern ceiling, searching for another tunnel with a group of guards. On one hand, she wanted to be done with the dungeon as fast as possible, especially since the warning she got through the new title's description was worrying her a lot more than she initially thought. The venerable physique of the primeval void was already messing with her body in all sorts of ways, and her soul was also already deformed as all hells. She did not need nor want to also become some sort of half-ghost or whatever else the irreversible changes might be. On the other hand, her current mana regeneration was under 3000 points per minute, and her stamina was even slower to come back as getting dragged through the spiritual realm wasn't exactly the most comfortable experience. If she could just find the exit and avoid getting in any fight throughout the dungeon it would be fine, but considering the guards had managed to feel her through the walls, she doubted it would be that easy when she supposedly had to go near the king. The good thing, though, is that this dungeon doesn't adapt to my and Paritha's strength like the previous one, so it should be relatively easier, in theory. Then again, the reward is a large heart catalyzer, when the one we got from Dueling Terran was a small one which allows to go from rank C to B. If we consider that there might be a regular type in the middle, the large probably allows the heart to upgrade from A to S rank. It would make sense for that one to be much harder to get. Unless the small large thing is only about the stats it gives, could also be that. Tunnel after tunnel, Sofia delved deeper inside of the Vake hive, taking care to never go too close to the guards. The hive was gigantic. Finally, after almost 3 hours of wall traversal during which she never found a single safe space to emerge from, she found a relatively small, and very well guarded part of the hive. It had a whole group of 10 guards protecting the entrance, their strong spirit looking like a bright bonfire shining through the spiritual realm. The inside of that subsection of the hive was particularly interesting because Sofia saw very few Vake inside. The cavernous room was about 500 meters across, and there were only 3 creatures inside, 2 small ones which could be any of the regular type Vake, and a very big one shining brighter than any of the guards until now. It was roaming slowly around the room. I don't know if it's the king, but it has to be some kind of elite either way. This room is a dead end, though, so the exit can't be there. Still, I need to leave the spirit realm for a bit. I'm starting to feel uneasy. The big Vake is a bit worrying, but I think I can hide behind one of the pillars and I should be fine with the invisibility. As long as it doesn't come too close. Sofia observed the movements of the large Vake across the room for a short while. She found no obvious patterns to them. Whatever, I really need to step out right now. She had the graveyard skeletons carry her through one of the pillars, and she emerged from the pillar inside of the room, near a corner, as far as she could from the 3 creatures. Finally she re-entered the physical realm. Her invisibility instantly broke out as she was incapable of standing still, in fact she was incapable of standing at all, falling to her knees with a highly distorted sense of sight and a spinning head. Shit! The next few seconds were a hard-fought battle to stop herself from emptying her stomach on the ground. It took her half a minute to suppress the symptoms of what she decided to dub the spirit sickness, and she was very grateful that the Vake were busy roaming around the other half of the room during that time. That being said, while she again managed to stand still for 3 seconds and reactivate her invisibility, she could not feel the Vake at all. Her mana senses were useless as there was no ambient mana the Vake could be displacing, and they also had no mana at all. Smell and hearing were likewise useless in an environment without air. She could only rely on sight, and she was facing a corner of the room, so there was not much to be seen besides white stone and rocks. It's all right, I just need to be careful when I summon them. Out of her bone storage came a round bone token, which she hurriedly caught midair with bone dominus and sent gliding along the pillar she was next to. Connecting her vision to it, she could finally really see what she had stepped into. Oh fuck! The big Vake was a lot more intimidating than even its spiritual body could have hinted at. Vake Royal Guard, LV, Imprint Power. Effect, Vake Fortress Skill Shard, 1/3. What are the chances that it is over level 300? Pretty high. To say that it was a walking fortress was no exaggeration. Its gigantic armored body would make even current Perith look like a dwarf in front of a castle, and the skill shard imprint further reinforced that notion. And the small ones? They are literally wearing crystal crowns. Vake First Prince, LV.217, Imprint Power, 0. Vake Third Princess, LV.185, Imprint Power, 0. Worst of all, they were not mindless monsters. The prince, who looked like some kind of giant human-sized long mix between a crab and a shrimp, was currently polishing its own shell with a large brush, while the princess, which looked about the same but much smaller, about the size of a large dog, was busy writing something on stone tablets. Writing. I can't read it, but it's hard not to recognize that these are structured sentences in an unknown language. The paper people were one thing, but even these. And they don't even have a class. They don't even have the system. I always thought all intelligent people were automatically given system privilege. Even Terran, a sunless, clearly had it. So why? This changed little about Sofia's main goal within the dungeon. She had no need to kill them, but she did feel like this instantly narrowed her possibilities a whole lot. She had thought up plans to have the hive collapse or such other colorful things to potentially farm imprints, but these instantly all went out the window. No wonder you don't have to kill the boss. It would just be cruel, wouldn't it? Now that I think about it, I don't even know for a fact that they are hostile. They reacted when I blasted a hole through their hive, but that's it. Chances are they could be a peaceful species overall, surviving by themselves on a lonely moon. How do I go from here? If I could isolate the princess and find a way to communicate. Chapter 426, A New Foe Appears. In the end, the plan to try to communicate was too much of a stretch. Even assuming she could single out the Vake princess and that she was willing to cooperate, Sofia couldn't find a proper way to cross the language barrier, not when the other person looked so different. She only saw two possible ways to make it work, either to spend a significant amount of time trying to learn the written Vake language, or to try to get a message across through drawings. In both cases, results were uncertain, and she could possibly end up in a much worse situation than where she was right now. Remaining undetected within the hive walls was a much safer position. I'm still curious about their lack of system, though. And so far the royals are the only ones who seem to have an actual personality. I wonder. Maybe their species evolved intelligent thought after the system's creation, so they're not included? Or is it because of the lack of mana? That could be it. They live without mana, they don't produce it nor live in an environment with it. They're completely disconnected. The paper people seem to interact with mana through electricity, I think. I don't think they actually produced or stored any. I couldn't feel any of that, at least. Meanwhile the Sunless. Did Terran produce his own mana? Hard to say, he could just as well be supplied by the system considering he works for it. So is interacting with mana in any way enough to get the system? And being intelligent enough? That would explain why monsters aren't included. They absorb and use mana even if they don't produce any, but they're just not smart enough. Sort of? I should see if I can ask Kyle on the way out. Sofia spent as long as she could just waiting in the same room, but the time came shortly after when she had to leave her spot by phasing through the floor, as the royal guard roamed around the place, and she couldn't let it sense her. Going back to the previous room, she took another tunnel, and kept slowly mapping out the hive, trying to find the Vake King. As she delved deeper and deeper, the number of regular Vake roaming around slowly decreased, leaving place for more and more guards. Empty rooms were rare but existed, and provided Sofia with much-needed resting points to get rid of the spirit sickness. It took her several days to navigate to the deepest parts of the hive, trying her best to stay extremely safe. She was bored out of her mind, but nothing could justify attacking the creatures. The regular guards and Vake workers had laughably weak imprints, not even giving full stat points for the most of them, and she would have to slaughter countless of them to reap anything of value. The only worthwhile targets were the very rare royal guards, and they were always only hanging around young royal Vake, which Sofia refused to murder for no reason, and they would definitely be caught in the attacks if she were to seriously try to take down one of the massive royal guards. Finally, she found the king. Or rather, the king found her. While she peacefully made her way through the walls in the deepest section of the hive, the gigantic spirit body of the Vake king came to her. Her identify said as much. Vake king, LV, imprint power. Effect. Sofia's first instinct had been to turn back, but the speed at which the graveyard skeletons allowed her to move through the spiritual realm was quite slow, and the Vake king was all but slow. He had appeared before her faster than she was even able to react to it. While Sofia's mind frantically searched for a way out, the king observed her. He's not attacking. Alright. I'm leaving. Sorry for intruding. The graveyard skeleton slowly dragged Sofia away from the king's spiritual body, only for her to be grabbed by giant pincers. The Vake king's spiritual claws. I'm fucked. As if responding to that, a new system notification popped up in Sofia's peripheral vision. Hint 5 of 5 found. Hint 5, some foes are not meant to be fought directly, dummy. Aha. Yeah, thanks for the tip. As if I couldn't have figured that out by myself. Asshole. I bet it's the human admin who wrote these hints. What a shitty sense of humor. Is it funny to know people die challenging the trials you designed? The Vake king dragged Sofia through the spiritual realm and she could do nothing to resist. In that form, the vast majority of her spells were unusable. She had basically no control over her movements outside of the graveyard skeleton's pull, and no strength to speak of. That was one thing she had failed to take into account about her habit of phasing through walls. It left her soul without a physical body to act as an anchoring point, which meant she was completely open to something like that. The soul protection from the mark of Afinareth was not even activating as the Vake king was not currently attacking and simply dragging her around in the depths of the moon. Right, I have the mark. I should be mostly safe. I know now that it doesn't prevent all soul damage, but a direct attack from this thing should definitely trigger it. Well, I can't do anything but let it drag my soul around, can I? There is not even any open space nearby for Perith to come out. I was overconfident. I can still get out of this somehow. Where are you dragging me? Perith, Bookie, stay hidden as long as I don't actually get attacked. It might still not be too late for a somewhat peaceful resolution. The Vake king's spirit pulled Sofia to the deepest chambers of the hive, finally dragging her out of the walls into a closed room. Sofia got to observe the Vake king's soul reuniting with his empty husk in the physical plane, and she was forcibly brought back to the physical plane as the Vake king crushed the graveyard skeleton sprouting out of Sofia's soul. The spell backlashed as it was forcefully cancelled, but the scepter absorbed it, yet Sofia could only fall to the ground as she reappeared in the physical plane, too disoriented by the spirit sickness and the sudden transition from one state to the other. In this moment of utter powerlessness, Sofia was perfectly calm. She was ready to teleport to Zangdar as a last resort if the Vake king attacked her. She still had more than 99% of her health, so the one-hit kill protection from VPPV would save her and give her enough time to escape. But no attack came. She was given time to recover from the spirit sickness while the gigantic grey-shelled Vake king stood over her, observing her with large black round eyeballs. Perith was ready to come out at any time, but he trusted Sofia's judgment and kept himself hidden, for now. It took a good minute for Sofia to recover enough to stand up. The Vake king looked at her but did not react. His numerous appendages and antennae-looking parts were moving around slowly like tree branches rattled by the wind, but that was the extent of his movements. Sofia couldn't read its intentions at all. She faced the king. His giant left claw was still right next to her. Even without magic, he could crush her into meat paste faster than she could blink. She had little doubts about that. What should my next move be? Not meant to be fought. Yeah, no kidding. What level is this thing? 350? 400? It's not an opponent that should be in the third trial. In the physical world I can be very fast. But can I be fast enough to escape this place? Is it even possible? no. Unless I'm completely wrong and the king isn't so high level and just has an abnormally strong spiritual body, then I won't even be able to leave this room. Let alone escape. The room in question was some kind of throne room, at least that was how Sofia read it. It was quite symmetrical with impressive pillars and a straight passage leading to a big thing. Sofia's best guess was that it was a throne since the Vake had this whole thing with a king and princes, but understandably, a throne for these creatures would look nothing like the humans' version of kingly glorified chairs. The exit I'm looking for could be in this very room. Completely lost on how to proceed, Sofia wanted to try to communicate. But speaking without air was impossible, and she was worried that anything she might try, like summoning a bone tablet to write or draw on, might prompt the king to react violently. At the same time, she was scanning the area with her mana senses, but the lack of ambient mana made it very hard to sense anything, and she wasn't finding any traces of a secret exit anywhere near the throne room. Sofia felt weak vibrations in the ground. Reflexively, she focused her mana senses behind her to try to see what was happening without looking away from the impassible Vake King. For the first time since she had entered the Vake Hive, she felt mana from outside, strong mana, coming her way. Words were spoken directly in her head. "Hello there, tall girl. Found yourself in quite the situation, did ya?" From the way the mana was spread in the approaching individual, Sofia understood who was talking. A Sunless. Chapter 427, just like that? Sofia still did not dare to look away from the Vake King, and with the lack of air, she could not speak, so, for a lack of a better option, she used her back as a writing board. She flattened the back of her bone armor and let her words carve themselves upon it. "Hello. Yes. Please help." The Sunless laughed. Her chuckles were light, almost musical in nature. Sofia felt her coming closer. She stopped at a reasonable distance. Any closer and Perith might have probably decided to come out on his own. Again the Sunless spoke. There was an ethereal, melodic quality to her voice, something almost enchanting. Sofia could almost feel it wrapping around her brain like a silken veil. "This good king has called me to be the middleman, quite the honor, that," she explained with another chuckle. "Oh, thank the lords, this situation can still be salvaged. He must have seen something in ye." Yes. I smell Terran's magics on you, did you enjoy the dance?" "She can smell that." Again, Sofia reshaped the bone armor to send another message. "I would rather it not be my last." "Ahaha, now, turn around, Vaidrenth is not going to eat you." "Not yet." Reassuring. Sofia carefully turned around, mindful not to make any abrupt movement. She could finally lay her eyes on the appearance of her new lifeline in this uncertain situation. This Sunless was a lot like Terran. A mostly human-like shape, in the characteristic dark black and oily substance of the Sunless, with a few white highlights. She was about 20 centimeters shorter than Sofia. From her outlines, she seemed to be wearing an oversized vest of some kind with long sleeves hiding her hands, and some kind of slanted cut skirt. She had long, messy hair that seemed to have a life of its own, squirming around behind her back like a basket full of eels. Other noteworthy features were two horns to the side of her head, though from Sofia's perspective it was hard to tell if they were not more akin to pointy vampire ears, and her legs ended in sharp pointy tips instead of feet. Unlike Terran, whose 3 white highlights had been a singular eye, a glove, and the ribbon of a hat, she had 7. The main one was a necklace with an eye pendant. The eye sitting on this Sunless chest was looking straight at Sofia. The other white highlights were white rings at the end of her long sleeves, 3 on each arm. They were all packed with large amounts of mana, at least 200,000 points each. Sunless Mage, LV.250 plus, Imprint Power, 10,000, Effect, plus 1,000,000 mana. Holy fucking shit, what? Well? The polite thing is to at least remove your helmet, you know? Removing my helmet in such hostile territory is... whatever. It would be hard to defend against just her, let alone the giant crab behind me. Sofia's bone helmet was seamlessly absorbed into her skin, revealing her face and her blonde hair tied into a thick bun. Ooh, we caught quite the looker today. And a Saintess to boot. What are you doing running around with 2 mana hearts, though, I wonder? Yeah, of course she would notice. Creating another bone tablet in front of her, Sofia wrote yet another message. I can show you. Promise the Vake will not attack. Again the Sunless chuckled. I can hardly promise such a thing. You are a trespassing intruder, after all. I hear that you even blew up an entrance of the hive. The words on the bone tablet rearranged themselves. Mistake on my part. Or was it? Everyone here knows what you came for. Let us see what Vedranth thinks, he's the one who will decide your fate, I'm just a translator. Following this was a worrying silence. Focusing on her surroundings, Sofia understood how the Sunless and the Vake King communicated, they were using ground vibrations. For the Sunless, they were made through magic, while the Vake King was simply wrapping one of his legs on the ground. Of course, despite noticing that, Sofia had no way to know what was actually being said. After 2 long minutes of back and forth ground vibrations, the communication stopped. Sofia anxiously stared at the Sunless eye which had been unfocused during the exchange. It looked at her again. Lucky you, it seems Vedranth is willing to let you go on account of the little damage you did to the hive and since you have not harmed his successors. The Sunless explained, sounding genuinely happy for Sofia. Sofia hurriedly reshaped the bone tablet to say thank you very much for your help. Internally, she was thanking the entire pantheon of the divine that she hadn't gone through with her idea of grabbing the Vake princess to try to communicate. He is even willing to help you complete the dungeon. The Sunless woman continued, nonchalantly putting her hands on her hips. Now, that sounds a lot too good to be true. For a price, of course. And what would that price be? Let me explain, girl, you might not like his conditions. Sofia learned a bit more about this Sunless and what the Vake King wanted from her as the Sunless escorted her out of the throne room and into another room in the hive, walking past the imposing Vake guards and royal guards without any issue. The girl's name was Everell. She openly told Sofia that she was the manager of another dungeon hidden on this moon, and that she was always the one who had to bail out people from the Vake hive. That was by design. Finding the king's secret exit was almost impossible. To begin with, getting that far within the hive without getting captured was already a rare occurrence. There was supposedly a way to clear the dungeon by creating enough chaos to make the Vake too busy to deal with a single invader. But that required finding enough hints and spending enough time to get a deep understanding of the Vake society, communications, and chain of command, to unleash Ragnarok upon them. And it was quite dangerous as that would turn the king and queen hostile, so one had to either find a way to escape their detection or to divert their attention by essentially kidnapping their children without harming them. When asked if there was no issue with telling her all this, Everell laughed it off, saying that Sofia wouldn't be able to share it with anyone due to the censor, and as she was already caught, it was all useless information. And Sofia had to admit that even had she known all that before stepping foot into the hive she still might not have been able to pull it off. Then came time to explain the Vake King's request. As a repayment for the dead Vake from the Angel Bolt, and for the right to easily clear the dungeon, Sofia just had to accept to go kill a few of the Vake's enemies on the moon. A simple request. Mr. Scribe even took the time to make it a proper quest for ease of tracking. That being said, there were a few caveats. First of all, Sofia was never actually given the opportunity to reject the offer even had she wanted to. And secondly, a small centipede-looking Vake parasite was put around her neck as an insurance. The Vake parasite was actually level 250 plus and supposed to cut her head should she try to leave the moon without completing her mission. Sofia accepted without being too worried. She let the Vake parasite crawl around her neck like a choker. It just stopped moving there, she could hardly even feel it. Worst case, I just lost some health. Even without healing I can still reattach my head and my nerves are already all light so severing my spine is as good as doing nothing. I just can't reattach my throat so speaking and eating will be out. I might also lose a bit in terms of head mobility. Still nowhere as bad as the death sentence they think this is. Congratulations! You have received a mandatory quest. Vake King's request, do not harm any Vake, kill at least 1,000 adult moonworms and 1 moonworm matriarch. Advance rewards, leave the Vake hive alive and through the Vake King's secret exit. Reward, Vake token of friendship. Time limit, upon leaving the moon. Penalty for failure, beheading. Could the Sun Warrior title work here? Sun's Warrior, complete a deathly wager quest from Sunday. Effect, no penalty is applied in case of a quest failure. This title must be worn and kept from the moment you accept the quest for the effect to apply. /ephemeral/ this title will be lost upon negating 1 failure. Probably not, since I can't actually accept the quest. It's not even a proper system quest, just Mr. Scribe being helpful. Everell had a good look at the parasite. She eyed Sofia curiously. People are a bit more reluctant to accept this usually. Are you not worried at all? I suppose you won against Terran, so it must not be groundless confidence. I'll be waiting for ya in my dungeon after you're done with this, don't make me wait, alright? Now let's get to that secret exit. Chapter 428, All Hole in One. The secret exit wasn't all that hidden, it was just a hole in the ground in a room guarded by 4 Vake royal guards. And it was just that, a hole, not a relatively clean and straight tunnel like everywhere else in the hive, a simple hole that looked like it had always been there. Everell stood on the border of the hole. There you go. Have a nice trip, hun. Sofia remodeled her bone tablet. That's it. Not what you expected. Come to my dungeon, then, it's a lot more fun. Can I know where it is? Of course not. You should find it by yourself. Go now, before the king changes his mind. Said Vake King had been following Sofia and Everell from a distance, accompanied by a whole retinue of guards. All right. See you again soon. Everly's necklace eye narrowed, and without warning, she shoved Sofia down the hole. As Sofia fell, the sunless voice whispered in her mind. I will be waiting. Sofia was only half surprised about getting pushed in, if she had to be honest, she had let it happen, either Everell was surprisingly weak for her level, or she had been holding back a great deal. Just as she let herself fall, Sofia changed her title back to the cheater, and fired a bunch of identifying magic toward everyone. With so many requests for Mr. Scribe all at once, it would be a few seconds before anything showed up. What a mysterious person. It only makes me more curious about the Sunless. Where do they come from? Why do they work for the system? The identify results started coming in, starting from the Royal Guards, they were all between level 250 and 299. Vake Royal Guard, LV 264, Imprint Power, 200, Effect, Vake Fortress Skill Shard, 1/3, the Royal Guards charged with the protection of the Vake Royal family. Their attack power is lacking, but their defensive capabilities are second to none. Not as strong as I feared, the imposing size is deceptive, but the harvesters I bolted at the hive entrance were of a similar level. Perith could probably hold one off while I charge a bolt if needed. It would have been nice to get the skill shards for Perith, but I guess it wasn't meant to be. Hopefully the worms will have good imprints considering how many I have to kill. Meanwhile, as Sofia dropped down the endless hole, she periodically used her dragon scale claws to scratch at the wall and slow her descent to a reasonable speed. How deep is this? I'll soon get to the center of the moon at this rate. Hive Lord, LV 386, Imprint Power, Keystone, Effect, Unknown. Oh, that must be the king. Keystone? That's new. Weren't keystones a thing to build stone gates? I need to reread my books on architecture. While she fell, Sofia did just that, she grabbed a book from her storage and started reading at her top speed. It only took her a few seconds to find the page about arches and the importance of the keystone. Crucial structural element holding everything in place, allowing the arch to bear weight. Interesting. So I can expect that this keystone imprint is meant to be used as a finishing touch on the heart to stabilize everything else? Maybe as a last step when you have no more space for regular imprints? Getting this one is just impossible, though. Also, actual class name and no additional description, further confirming the Vake King is a person with access to the system, and not just some brainless monster, though that was already obvious. Maybe the Sunless Nightbringer has one too? That thing was positively gigantic. Finally, the identify result from Everell came back. Dungeon Core, Sunless, LV.299, Imprint Power, 10,000, Effect, plus 1,000,000 mana. Dungeon Core? That's her class? As in she's the core part of a dungeon? Is that a bit like Saria's class then? You have conquered the dungeon, Fenrir's Trial of Ragnarok, congratulations. A small wooden box like the Gachapon boxes appeared in the air near Sofia, which she quickly grabbed before it could collide with the sharp walls of the infinite hole she was falling down. Feels like it's empty. Sofia opened the box and a quartet of system notifications appeared. Choice box. Pick one of 3 random large heart catalyzers. Large slashing heart catalyzer. Large exploding heart catalyzer. Large cursing heart catalyzer. Seeing the choice appear, Sofia felt the need to pause her fall completely and think. Digging her claws into the stone, she soon came to a stop and started considering her options. Considering the small slashing catalyzer she had gotten from Terran's dungeon gave 5% slashing damage resistance, it was fair to assume these all gave at least 10% of their respective bonuses. Now, the 3 options were good. Slashing was especially good for Perith, whose bones had a bad tendency of getting cut through by stronger opponents, and combined with the small catalyzer of the same type, it would start to add up to a lot of resistance. Exploding would give Sofia more leeway to just throw explosive bolts without a care even in closed environments. She already had 50% explosion resistance from VPPV, so any additional protection could bring her closer to a complete immunity, which was good to pursue. Lastly, cursing was valuable simply because Sofia had no protection against curses at all. Currently, her anti-curse tools were the Angel's Bolt acting as an anti-curse torch, but that only worked for weak ambient air curses, and the Ring of Zar which was essentially good against any kind of magic, but just once. Besides that, she had nothing against cursed mana. She understood a bit more about curses now from the classes in the academy and from hanging out with Zira a lot during the academy year, but just knowing about them was not a proper protection. The best protection against curses is still just barrier magic. I just haven't had time to really work on that. Finally, Sofia came to a swift decision, and a large glowing rock appeared inside of the previously empty wooden box. Large exploding heart catalyzer, a heart catalyzer crafted by a master mage. Allows one to upgrade their mana heart from rank A to S once sufficient imprint power has been collected. Gives the mana heart the added attribute, plus 15% explosion damage resistance. As expected, A to S rank. A whole 15%, not bad. Slashing would have been nice for Perith, but ideally I would rather get him a bludgeoning one, if that's a thing. It must be a thing. Sofia stored the catalyzer and let herself fall again. She could not see the end of this hole. She tried to keep her speed relatively slow, and every so often she would stop completely and complain about how this hole never ended. This lasted for so long that she was starting to wonder if the hole was not some kind of elaborate illusion and she had actually not moved at all. That was until something strange started happening. Despite the hole being mostly a straight-ish line down, Sofia could no longer fall straight down. Like the hole was slowly becoming a very steep slant. That was extremely annoying. She could no longer just fall, or she would just hit the walls every few seconds, and sliding against the uneven rock walls felt about as good as trying to slide on stairs. The slant became less and less steep, until Sofia could just walk upright within the hole. It had all happened very gradually and Sofia was completely lost as to where she actually was by now. Over the hours, she had tried several times to feel for other caverns or anything around the unending hole with the graveyard skeletons, but she never found anything. She was just lost deep underground, with only one way back and one way forward. I have been at this for like 6 hours now. The flat path Sofia ran through eventually became a slope. Seriously. It's going up now. I'm going to lose my mind at this rate. Sofia gave up with the hole. She crafted herself a bone coffin of sorts, attached a bunch of bone chains to it and changed the last ring of every chain to become a hook. She summoned her troop of 100 skeleton rats through Bookie, and secured them all to the hooks with bone dominus. The entire process took about 5 minutes, after which she simply wrapped herself in a blanket and laid down inside of the bone coffin before closing it back on herself, and making it a blessed construct instead of Perith. Now go, wake me up when we're back to the outside world. When Sofia woke up, the coffin was no longer moving. And she couldn't feel the rat's presence. Did they run out of time before getting me out of the hole? She spread her mana senses around, and what she felt left her perplexed. The environment was not whatever she had expected, in fact she was not near the exit of some hole, she was in what could only be called an actual room, with flat walls and doors. Where in the fuck did the rats bring me? Perith couldn't have seen anything if he was inside with me while I slept. Bookie, you have an explanation? Bookie appeared in the coffin near Sofia's head in his original book form, emitting his usual fog and a faint light. He opened by himself, presenting Sofia with a single page, the sandworm skeleton. Sandworm? Worms? So I didn't find the worms found me? Is that what you're hinting at? Why would they bring me to such a human-shaped place? And most importantly, why did you not wake me up? The book shivered and disappeared back to where it came from. Are you all right? Hey! The book reappeared within the coffin, trembling. When Sofia reached for him it instinctually floated back, knocking against the coffin's walls. Bookie? What is it? Are you scared of me? Could it be because I told him to wake me up when we reach the outside? I see. I'm not mad, I won't scold you. It was my fault for giving you a dumb order. These simple words seemed to placate the fearful Book. Seriously. You can do like Parath and act upon your own judgment next time. I really don't mind. In fact, I would prefer that. Now, let's see what this place has to offer. Chapter 429, Systemic Rejection. The shape of the room was relatively normal from a human perspective, except for the closed set of doors in the ceiling. There were tables along two opposite walls, and doors on the others. Sofia was currently on one such table, while there were things on the others which she thought were likely rocks. Confident that she was alone in the room, Sofia stored the bone coffin. What in the... The floor, walls, ceiling, and doors were all entirely made of something shiny and dark blue. At a glance, it looked a bit wet and probably sticky. It had small round wart-looking bumps which shone weakly, giving off some yellowish-white light. Are these walls made of some kind of magical toad skin? That sure is one way to get light underground. I get why the Vake would have an issue with these guys. The tables which lined the walls were made of flat Vake shell segments mounted on Vake legs, glued together by a hardened, messy black substance. Bits of moon rock were on the other tables seemingly sorted by size and color. A quick identify taught Sofia that these were all different mineral ores, mostly iron and copper. Still, clearly they have some kind of a civilization. At a glance, it's probably more advanced than the Vake, actually. I don't know if I can justify killing 1,000 of them even if they have a strange taste in furniture. It would be hypocritical to judge considering most of my usual furniture and tools are made of bone. Sofia poked the wall near her with a finger. Sticky indeed. Almost like it's covered in a thin layer of sap. Or is it sweat? Anyway, let's look around a bit. The bone hands of the graveyard skeletons emerged from Sofia's armor and grabbed a hold of it. The idea of going through the weird sticky wall was a bit disgusting even if she was in the spirit realm. She quickly had to stop, as she almost entered another room through the wall without checking what was inside. The walls are really thin. Not great for graveyarding around. There are rooms above and below too. Sofia pulled back and was back on top of the Vake table. Using the graveyard was a very slow way to move around. It could be useful to go undetected, but if the walls were not even thick enough for her to hide in, there was no point. I've seen how vulnerable it leaves my soul too. The Vake King really just grabbed me and I could not even try to do anything. Alright, to begin with, let's learn more about the worm people. Back to the basics. Parath is a bit big for this place. Stay around in book form, Bookie. Just float near me, we'll summon something if need be. Sofia jumped off of the table, of course the floor was also slightly sticky. Choosing to go for the doors on her left, Sofia looked inside of the next room by sliding a vision-sharing bone token in the thin gap between the double doors. The next room contained huge bins, made of Vake shells, full of a lot of rocks. On the opposite wall, instead of doors, there was just a big round hole. Some kind of mining tunnel. Explains how they dragged me in here. Some poor worm miner just brought a great bone calamity inside their home and they don't even know. Speaking of which, if you were to find a big bone coffin and bring it out of the mines with a bunch of ore, you would probably go fetch your superior to see what the damned thing was, right? Meaning two things, I should put the coffin back on the table to avoid suspicion, and I should promptly leave or hide. Sofia put the coffin back on the table. To make the weight consistent with her being inside it, she filled it with summoned blood and called it a day. They're up for a bloody surprise. Going through the doors in the ceiling would be a hassle, so Sofia did the token thing again on the other side of the room. That room featured more bins, smaller ones, which were all empty, and mounted on rails each facing closed trapdoors. More mining stuff. Let's just move until I find one of these worms. It took a surprisingly long time for Sofia to find anyone. The place she was an expansive underground mining facility, and for some reason it was currently completely empty of any living presence. There was not much to pilfer besides relatively cheap minerals, so Sofia did not touch anything in a bid to keep her presence hidden. What it took for her to finally find two of the worm people was to find the entrance of the place, where two guards were stationed. One of them even seemed like it was sleeping on the job. Either they had to evacuate the place for one reason or another. Or more likely, it's night and they have gone to sleep? She was spying on the two guards from afar with her mana senses. They had no mana at all, much like the Vake, but by spreading her own mana around she could still feel their shape, even if vaguely. Since the area beyond them was empty, as far as she could tell, she guessed that it was probably the outside. I might be able to identify them from here. As long as my mana can reach them, it should work even without vision. Since she still had the cheater title on, Sofia expected to learn a lot. Just in case the worms could feel the prodding of the identify mana surrounding them, she targeted the slouching one that wasn't moving and she thought was asleep. Guardian Kijikik, LV 233, Imprint Power, 0.3, Effect, plus 30 Health. An adult Kijikik of the Guardian variety. They specialize in defense and have various immunities, but are lacking in other areas. No actual class, just a biological variant. And the cheater title gave a description. It only does that for monsters. Just like it gave one for the Vake Guards but not for the Vake King or the Smart Sunless. An intelligent species without the system, recognized as monsters? That's the first time. I guess the Alphagiad might have been the same, maybe? It's hard to say whether that thing was acting on instinct or not. Wait, not. It could be identified. Back then I had no way to identify monsters. Has that ever happened again? No. Except for the Alphagiad, I've never been able to identify a monster before getting the cheater title. But if I remember correctly, it did not have a level. So. Like the angels. And like Sunday. I need to look more into how the system labels work. It can be precious information in situations like these. Now what, then? If I kill one of them, will it say defeated or will it say murdered? At a loss about what to do, Sofia identified the other guard, and the result was similar with a slightly higher level. It did not notice a thing. It's possible that they have strong spiritual bodies just like the Vake, so I should be careful with the graveyard, it could get me spotted depending on their abilities. Wanting to get a direct visual, Sofia stood a few rooms away from the entrance, and controlled a bone token from a distance, making it glide above the floor. Very carefully, she had it slide under the entrance doors, finally giving her a direct visual on the two worm people guards. Worms? Hey! That's not how I would have described them. They were more like human-sized centipedes. Their long chitinous body was of the same dark blue color as the walls of the mining facility. They stood upright, shaped like the number 2, with the tail part of their body on the ground, resting on many insectoid legs and ending in a dangerous-looking stinger. Their body was peculiar in a lot of way. They had short legs all over, 4 of them for each section of their segmented body, spread around in a cross shape. For the most part, aside from half the legs of their lower body used to stand on the ground, these many legs were folded up against their carapace. The rounded upper part of the number 2 shape they were standing in kind of reminded Sofia of someone standing with a hunched back, and from that part of their body sprouted 4 strange-looking arms which ended in small 3-fingered hands. They held onto long spears. Black iron shaft. Not bad but also not impressive. The spearheads are Vake claws. No antennae in sight, so they probably rely primarily on vision for sensing. Maybe communicating with vibrations like the Vake? They are not wearing anything besides the spears. No clothing or anything. I really don't know what to think. Looking past the guards themselves, it seemed the mining facility was dug into the walls of a large underground cavern. Unlike the Vake's clearly artificial hive, this one seemed natural in shape, aside from it being entirely covered in the sticky dark thing with its luminescent warts which made the cavern ceiling glow like an eerie underground starry sky. Besides that, inside the cavern was a fully fledged city, with many tall square buildings blocking the view. Chapter 430, Red Light, Green Light. Sitting, her back against a cubic container full of water, Sofia observed the city from the roof of one of the buildings. She had landed there after taking the long way around, having the graveyard skeletons carry her through the cavern walls and ceiling, dropping down directly on top of one of the tallest buildings around. This is beginning to feel like I might have to accept a beheading. The city was silent, despite being underground. Right now was clearly nighttime. Through the paneless windows of the buildings, Sofia could spy on many Kijikiks. They were all in their own home, peacefully asleep. The homes in question were a bit barren, and dreadfully impersonal. They were rectangular rooms, each floor of each building had 4 such identical rooms, each housing 1 worm person. They each had a bed, a table, a shelf, and a weird pot which by elimination was probably some kind of toilet. Lastly, they had a working rack to hold onto their working tools. Spears for the guards, pickaxes for the miners, brooms for the cleaners. It's as if they lack any personality beyond their job. The miners will have bits of ore on their shelf, the guards have Vake parts. They're all the same? The more I look at it, the more uneasy it makes me feel. And also, I don't see any children. Come to think of it, I see no obvious signs that there would be male or female worms. Their imprints all give either health or stamina. No skills and no mana. And I've yet to see a single one higher level than me. There must be stronger ones, though, or the Vake would have already destroyed this place, if they're at war. Without warning, the light in the city shifted from the soft yellowish-white glow of the wall warts to an oppressive red. Sofia was already tense, and surprised by the sudden change, she almost cursed out loud, but was saved by the lack of air to fill her lungs. I need to watch my mouth. What is this light? The light was coming from far behind her. Since Sofia was sitting behind a container, she was actually now in its shadow. The source of the light moved, shifting to the side. What is? Sofia stood up and instinctively circled around the container to stay out of the light as it. She didn't know why, but she strongly felt that nothing good could come from stepping into the light. Still wanting to understand what was going on, and failing to see anything with her mana senses, she brought up a bone token and had it levitate up until it allowed her to see above the container through the shared vision. She had her answer. The light was coming from the 4 gigantic eyes of a gargantuan worm person crawling around the cavern ceiling. It was looking in her direction. The large red beams of light all came together to focus on the water container. It saw the token. The creature moved, and Sofia moved as well. As the red-eyed worm rushed along the ceiling straight toward her, Sofia jumped off from the roof in the opposite direction and with clean acrobatics, used the upper ledge of the top floor's window to swing around and throw herself inside, vaulting over a sleeping worm person, doing her best to land as softly as possible. Sofia felt the bone token get destroyed. She quickly hid in a corner. Sadly, this was the best hiding spot the room had to offer. The giant worm was on the prowl. Outside, the light was shifting around a lot, shining multiple times into the small apartment through its singular window, sweeping the inside. The lack of sound on the moon was both a curse and a blessing at that moment. It allowed Sofia to not have to worry about the monster hearing her, but conversely, she couldn't know if it was close or far without exposing herself to look. She did not dare to move at all. Until something terrible happened. The apartment's tenant was stirring in its sleep. Its many legs shivered, its body started to unfurl from the depths of dreams. Shit! Waiting for the red lights to momentarily disappear, Sofia decisively jumped out of her corner and cut off the waking worm's head. The key dagger had no issue piercing right through the shell, especially since Sofia aimed at the joint. In 3 lightning-quick deep cuts, she severed the shell, flesh, and spine. Sofia ripped off the head thrice the size of her own and stored it in her eye. The body of the worm person was still moving. There was no kill message. The red light was approaching. Spine. Sofia grabbed the spine inside of the shell, and messed up the thing's bones from the inside, having them turn into blades and spin around, turning the creature's flesh into worm juice. You have defeated Cleaner Kijikik, LV 227, imprint badly damaged. She barely made it in time back to the corner of the room, her back pressed against the wall. The red light swept over the apartment. It stopped over the dead Kijikik for 3 seconds, during which Sofia stood stiller than she had ever been. The red light moved away. The worm Sofia had killed had been sleeping with its head against the wall. From the start, it had always been barely out of sight of the red light. So it was not obvious now that it was missing and oozing worm fluids on the floor. The light came again twice more, after which Sofia held her breath, figuratively, for half an hour, but the light never came again. After she felt enough time had passed, Sofia produced another bone token and had it slide along the wall and out the window. She had it fly up to the roof and she surveyed the cavern as far as she could see. There was no sign of the red light or the giant Kijikik anywhere. Finally assured that she was safe, Sofia fell to the floor. Sitting in a puddle of cold worm blood, tears welled up in her eyes. I have never been so scared in my entire life. There was no need to even identify the thing. Sofia could tell, this, whatever it was, could not possibly be under level 350 at the very least. Far beyond the realm of creatures she could hope to kill. And she could tell, this was a predator. There was no good outcome should she be caught. No negotiating, no getting quests, no getting revived by the unlife runes, no surviving long enough to find a way out. Only a swift and gruesome death awaited if she were to be found, she was certain of that. The teleportation to Zangdar would be her only saving grace, and even that might not activate fast enough to get her out of death's grasp in time. Sofia stood up, her legs still a bit shaky. Her bone armor shed a thin external layer to clean itself of the dark red worm blood. Should I clean up the mess? Sofia's current safety within the city was riding on staying undetected. There was a good chance that by the time someone found out about the dead worm person, she would already be long gone, but perhaps not. If someone comes to check out on this guy for any reason, like say, missing work, I can't have the entire city go into high alert because of an unexplained murder. Storing the dead body was the easy part of the cleanup, getting rid of the half-dried sticking dark blood was a bit trickier, but Sofia had no lack of rags to soak up in her storage, and conveniently, that Kijikik had been a cleaner, so there were brooms and mops on his tool rack. Sofia completely cleaned up the room, taking the bloodied mops with her. She also tried to absorb the dead worm's imprint, but it had been too long since its death, there was nothing left to collect. Hopefully if someone comes to check on this guy they'll first think he disappeared on his way off to work. She was about to leave when the luminosity outside changed. Feeling shivers running down her spine, Sofia jumped to the corner of the room. But this time it was actually not the red light, it was a gradual bright